Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're heading to the Balkans to uncover the fascinating story of Bulgaria.
A land of ancient treasures, empires, and a resilience that echoes through the centuries.
We're going to journey through time to understand what makes Bulgaria tick, unearthing some incredible facts along the way.
Like, did you know they have the oldest gold treasure in the world?
Older than the pyramids? No way.
Way. It's called the Varna Necropolis, a burial site dating back over 6,000 years.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. What can you tell us about this treasure? And the people who made it, were they just tripping over gold nuggets or something?
No, not quite. The Varna culture was much more advanced than you might think. This wasn't just raw gold. They were smelting it, shaping it into intricate jewelry, beads, bracelets, even a gold-covered scepter.
A scepter. Okay, these guys were not messing around, so we're talking about a sophisticated society, right?
Exactly. With specialized skills and probably trade networks that stretch far and wide. Makes you wonder what else they were up to.
Makes you wonder, indeed. Now, I can't talk about ancient Bulgaria without mentioning the Thracians. They play a big role in the story, don't they?
Absolutely. A key group that contributed to what we now call Bulgaria. They were famous for their metalworking skills, just like the people of Varna, but also for their horsemanship. And their legends even made their way into Greek mythology.
Really? Like what?
Well, you've probably heard of Orpheus, the musician who journeyed to the underworld to bring back his beloved Eurydice.
Oh yeah, definitely. Tragic love story.
Right. Well, that's a tale rooted in Thracian lore, just one example of their cultural influence.
So we've got these skilled goldsmiths, legendary musicians. This is shaping up to be quite the vibrant picture of ancient Bulgaria. How does this all connect to the Bulgaria we know today? How do we get from there to here?
Well, it's quite a journey. After the Thracians, the Roman Empire extended its reach into the region.
Ah, yes, the Romans, those guys got around.
Well, they did. By the 1st century AD, the area that is now Bulgaria was part of the Roman Empire. This brought Roman law, infrastructure, and importantly, Christianity.
Okay, so the Romans leave their mark. But their empire didn't last forever, right?
Yeah.
What happened in Bulgaria when the Romans exited the scene?
Well, as Roman influence waned, there was a wave of migrations. Slavic tribes arrived, bringing their own languages and customs to the mix.
So things are getting even more interesting. Lots of cultural influences coming together.
Right. And then, in the 7th century, a group called the Bulgars arrived, led by a ruler named Aspero. And they established the first Bulgarian Empire in 681 AD.
Hold on, Bulgars. From where?
They came from Central Asia, nomadic people who ultimately created a powerful empire.
Wow, this is like something straight out of Game of Thrones.
It is a pretty epic story, and this first Bulgarian empire would dominate a large part of the Balkans for centuries.
So Bulgaria is named after a group that wasn't even originally from the Balkans?
Precisely, but their impact was immense.
Okay, I'm hooked. What made this first Bulgarian empire so significant? Why should we care about them today?
For several reasons. For one, they adopted Eastern Orthodox Christianity in 864 AD, which was a huge turning point for the region.
Okay, so they embrace a new religion. Makes sense. But what else?
Well, they also played a crucial role in developing the Cyrillic alphabet.
Wait, really? The alphabet used in Russia, Serbia, all those places?
That's right. Think about it, scholars like St. Clement of Ohrid, working at the Preslav Literary School, helped create a writing system that allowed for the translation of religious texts into the Slavic languages.
So because of Bulgaria, millions of people could access knowledge and express themselves in their own languages. Wow.
Exactly. Literacy spread, Christianity spread, the impact was huge, and it echoes through to today.
That's quite a legacy. But I'm guessing, like all empires, this one eventually came to an end.
Sadly, yes. Internal struggles, pressure from the Byzantine Empire, it all led to the first Bulgarian Empire falling in 1018 AD. But don't worry, the story doesn't end there. Oh, there's got to be more. A second empire, right? Give me the sequel.
You got it. Almost 200 years later, in 1185, the Asen brothers led a rebellion against Byzantine rule.
Sounds dramatic.
It was. And they succeeded, establishing the Second Bulgarian Empire.
Bulgaria's back in the game.
They are. This empire had its capital at Veliko Tarnovo and experienced a golden age, especially under Tsar Ivan Asen II in the 13th century, a period of flourishing trade, art, and culture.
Talk about resilience. But I have a feeling this golden age doesn't last forever, does it?
You're right. By the late 14th century, a new power was on the rise, the Ottoman Turks.
Uh-oh. This can't be good.
No, it wasn't. Despite fierce resistance, the Second Bulgarian Empire fell under Ottoman rule in 1396.
And that marks the beginning of a whole new chapter in Bulgarian history.
It does, a long and challenging chapter, but one full of resilience and spirit. And that's a story for the next part of our deep dive. So last time, we left off with Bulgaria entering a pretty tough chapter 5 centuries under Ottoman rule. That's a long time. What was life actually like for Bulgarians during this era?
Yeah, 500 years, it's hard to even wrap your head around that, right?
Well, it was a time of immense change and, honestly, a lot of hardship for the Bulgarian people. Think about it, under Ottoman rule, many aspects of Bulgarian culture were suppressed. Language, religious practices, even just speaking your native tongue could get you in trouble.
That's wild. How did they even hold on to their identity with all that pressure?
That's a really good question. It's interesting, though, because the very system the Ottomans used to control their population actually ended up being a way for Bulgarians to preserve their culture. It's kind of ironic.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this system.
Well, the Ottomans organized their subjects into what were called millets. These were basically religious communities.
So instead of nations, they had these religious communities. How did that help the Bulgarians? Well, you got to remember back then, national identity wasn't quite as strong as it is today. Religion, on the other hand, that was a major unifying force. So the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, it became a center for preserving traditions, language, all those things that made them Bulgarian.
Ah, I see. So it was like this hidden network of culture.
Exactly. Monasteries became secret schools, keeping the embers of Bulgarian culture burning. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It is. But did this suppression last the entire 500 years? I mean, was there any pushback against Ottoman rule?
Oh, definitely. And this is where we see that resilience of the Bulgarian people. By the 18th century, ideas from the European Enlightenment, they were starting to make their way into the Ottoman Empire. And Bulgarians, inspired by these ideas of freedom and self-determination, they started rediscovering their history, their culture. This period is known as the Bulgarian National Revival.
Ah, so like a national awakening sparked by the Enlightenment. Were there any key figures or events that really fueled this revival?
Oh, tons. It was a multifaceted movement. But one guy who played a huge role, Hazy Hilandarsky, his book, Slavonic Bulgarian History, came out in 1762. And it basically reminded Bulgarians of their glorious past, It sparked this longing for freedom, urged them to reclaim their heritage.
So, like a single book set off this whole national revival? That's pretty incredible. But I imagine words alone can only go so far, right? Did this revival eventually lead to any action?
It totally did. The desire for liberation, it all culminated in the April Uprising of 1876. Bulgarians, fueled by this yearning for self-rule, they rose up against Ottoman control.
Sounds like a turning point. Was the uprising successful?
Sadly, no. It was brutally crushed by the Ottomans. The violence, the atrocities that they committed during the suppression, it was just horrific. I mean, people across Europe were reading about these massacres. There was international outrage.
Man, that's just awful. But it sounds like even though it failed, this was a turning point, right? Did all this outrage lead to any kind of outside intervention?
You're right. It was a turning point, even though it was tragic. The atrocities that happened, they caught the attention of Russia, which saw itself as a protector of Orthodox Christians in the Balkans.
Ah, so Russia saw an opportunity to step in.
Yeah, you could say that. The Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78 broke out. And with the help of Bulgarian volunteers, Russia ended up defeating the Ottomans pretty decisively.
So this war led to Bulgaria's liberation.
It did. The Treaty of San Stefano in 1878 recognized the creation of an autonomous Bulgarian principality. So not full independence, but it was a massive step towards freedom after almost 500 years of Ottoman rule.
Wow, what a victory after everything they'd been through. But you said principality. Does that mean there were some strings attached?
Exactly. The Bulgarians were celebrating this newfound autonomy, but the treaty, it caused some concern among the other European powers. Britain, Austria, Hungary, Germany, they weren't too keen on Russia expanding its influence in the Balkans.
Yeah, the old game of power politics. So what happened? Did they just ignore the treaty?
Not quite. They called a big meeting, the Congress of Berlin, later that year, and basically rewrote the treaty. And they ended up shrinking the territory of the Bulgarian principality.
Oh, man. Talk about a letdown.
It was a huge setback for Bulgaria. It meant that many Bulgarians were left outside of this new state. And that decision, it would have consequences down the road.
So Bulgaria got some freedom, but it sounds like things were still pretty messy.
Yeah.
What happened in this new principality? How did they fare?
Well, despite all the limitations, Bulgaria, they made some bold moves. In 1885, they united with Eastern Rumelia, a direct challenge to great powers. And then in 1908, they declared full independence, becoming the Kingdom of Bulgaria.
So finally, after all that time, Bulgaria is free and independent.
Yes, but they had a complicated past, a lot of ground to make up for, and unfortunately, the 20th century wasn't going to be any easier. 2 world wars, a whole new set of challenges. That's where we're headed next in our deep dive.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From ancient goldsmiths to empires rising and falling, and then that long struggle under Ottoman rule. Now we're stepping into the 20th century, which, as we all know, was a pretty tumultuous time for, well, pretty much everyone. So how did Bulgaria fare during this era of global conflicts and, all that ideological stuff?
Well, remember how we talked about the Congress of Berlin back in the 19th century, how they kind of messed with Bulgaria's borders? Well, that decision, it left a lot of ethnic Bulgarians outside of the new Bulgarian state.
Right. It created that whole sense of, unfinished business, right?
Exactly. And that feeling, that sense of national grievance, it really shaped Bulgaria's actions in the 20th century. It's like this underlying current that runs through everything.
So they enter the 20th century with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, huh? Did this lead them into any conflict?
It did. Bulgaria jumped into the Balkan Wars of 1912-13, hoping to expand their territory and unite those Bulgarian populations that had been left out.
So they're trying to right those historical wrongs. Did it work?
Unfortunately, no. These wars actually ended in defeat for Bulgaria, which left them frustrated and, to be honest, in a pretty tough spot economically.
2 steps back after all that work to gain independence. Ouch. With World War I on the horizon, where did Bulgaria stand? Did they manage to stay neutral?
Sadly, no. Those old wounds, the desire to regain lost territory, it all pushed Bulgaria to side with the Central Powers. Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire.
So they're taking another gamble, hoping this alliance will pay off. Did it?
You can probably guess the answer to that. Just like the Balkan Wars, World War I also ended in defeat for Bulgaria. And the Treaty of Neuilly-sur-Seine, that was signed after the war, it imposed some harsh penalties, more territorial losses, heavy reparations. It was a pretty devastating blow for a nation that had already been through so much.
Man, that's rough. 2 major wars, 2 major defeats. What was the impact on the country? How did it even recover from that?
The years between the wars were a chaotic time. Politically, economically, it was just turmoil. Governments were constantly changing. Extremist ideologies were gaining ground. Fascism, you name it. It was a time of deep uncertainty.
Trying to find their footing after all that upheaval. And then, bam, World War II explodes onto the scene. Did Bulgaria get dragged into this one too?
Sadly, yes. In 1941, under pressure from Nazi Germany, Bulgaria joined the Axis powers. But, and this is important, their involvement in this war was complicated.
Complicated how?
Well, they did occupy parts of Yugoslavia and Greece, but they flat out refused to participate in the invasion of the Soviet Union. And get this, they protected their Jewish population from being deported to the Nazi death camps.
Wow, really? That's pretty amazing considering everything else that was going on.
It was a remarkable act of defiance, but aligning with the Axis powers, even with those caveats, it couldn't last forever, right?
Yeah, not exactly a winning strategy in the long run.
Exactly. As the war turned against Germany, the Soviet Union declared war on Bulgaria and invaded in 1944. A communist-backed coup happened, and Bulgaria ended up switching sides, joining the Allies for the rest of the war. Talk about a whirlwind.
It's like they're constantly caught between these powerful forces, just trying to survive.
So what happened after the war? Did things finally settle down?
Well, in a way, yes. But it was the start of a whole new era for Bulgaria. The communist era. The Bulgarian Communist Party, with the Soviet Union backing them, they took control, establishing a one-party state.
Another huge shift for Bulgaria. What was it like for people living under communist rule?
Well, like a lot of countries in the Soviet bloc, Bulgaria saw massive changes. The economy got nationalized, they focused on industrialization and collectivized agriculture. There were definitely some positive things. Improvements in social welfare, education, healthcare, things like that.
So progress in some areas.
Right. But of course, it came at a cost. Political freedom was basically non-existent, any opposition was suppressed, individual liberties were restricted, the classic trade-off. How long did this communist era last?
It lasted for a while, all throughout the Cold War, basically. Bulgaria's economy was totally tied to the Soviet bloc. There were some good times economically, some not so good times. But as we know, the Soviet Union itself eventually crumbled.
Right, the whole system came crashing down. Did that impact Bulgaria?
Big time. In 1989, those democratic revolutions that were sweeping across Eastern Europe, they finally reached Bulgaria. Protests, demonstrations, all that forced the Communist Party to give up some of its power. Free elections were held in 1990, and that marked the beginning of Bulgaria's transition to democracy.
From ancient empires to a people's republic, and then finally, a democracy. What a journey. But I imagine transitions like that aren't exactly smooth sailing, right?
You're telling me. Bulgaria had to deal with a lot: economic instability, political uncertainty, and the huge challenge of building democratic institutions from scratch. It wasn't easy. There were definitely bumps along the way.
But they made it through.
Yeah.
So where does Bulgaria stand today?
Well, today, Bulgaria is a member of both NATO and the European Union. They've made some real progress in establishing a democratic system, a market economy. Of course, they still have challenges to face, things like corruption, economic disparities, all those things that a lot of countries deal with. But they've come such a long way. It's a testament to their resilience, that's for sure.
It really is. From those ancient goldsmiths creating those incredible treasures to a nation forging its own path in a really complex world, Bulgaria's story is pretty inspiring, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it's just scratching the surface. Bulgaria has so much to offer. Stunning landscapes, a rich culture, amazing food, warm hospitality. I really encourage everyone listening to go explore it for themselves. There are so many hidden gems just waiting to be discovered in this fascinating corner of the Balkans.
Well, you've definitely got me hooked. Bulgaria is officially on my travel list now. Thanks so much for taking us on this journey through Bulgarian history. It's been an amazing deep dive. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with more explorations into the captivating world of history and discovery. Until then, keep those minds curious and keep exploring.